am.
The first question, and this is actually a question that a lot of people have asked me, is what is the difference between athletic director and athletic coordinator?
So the athletic director has the actual like administration certification. I'm just a teacher. I'm a teacher at Norwich High School, and they asked me to be the athletic coordinator. And I went out and got a certification through the NIAAA that a lot of local guys have, and they guided me into that direction. So I'm considered to be a registered athletic administrator, I believe is the actual title. I'm going to work on some other stuff, but a lot of the local guys have it. It really a lot of the schools in this area don't have athletic directors anymore as a money savings, and that's really what Norwich has done in the past. So I'm part-time teacher, part-time athletic coordinator, full-time teacher probably. But
A big reason that we wanted to have you in today, and we'll get there, is some of the decisions that have happened with coronavirus, and of course, I think Oneonta and Norwich were out ahead of that. So we definitely wanted to pick your brain about that here today. But first off, like, how was your summer? This was your first year being athletic coordinator, and you just got absolutely thrown into the fire with this. So how was your summer? Did you get any time for yourself?
summer was strange because I usually work for my father for the last, I don't know, geez, every year of my life I work for my father. My father owns the Morris Auction Gallery. So I usually am either setting up auctions for him or I'm doing tent rentals for him. And this was the first summer because of coronavirus. I didn't work for him. Generally, the last summer I was hired as athletic coordinator. So I had a summer before I was actually the athletic coordinator. And I would go in and work mornings at the school, and then I would work for my dad in the afternoon. So this was strange just personally because I didn't work for him. And personally, my family and I have 3 kids and a lovely wife. We did some camping. We're big campers. We like to camp. We went to my in-laws a lot. We did a lot of family stuff around town in Norwich, but nothing extraordinary. We couldn't go on vacation this year. We usually either go to the Outer Banks or Ocean City, but we couldn't do that this year. So we went to some places in Vermont and other places, but really the strangest part is just not working for my father.
I have to ask, I was thinking about saving it for later, but let's just dive right into it here. Can you tell us about your, I don't know if I would call it your gravestone hobby, your graveyard hobby? Did you get to do any of that this summer, and just explain how you got into that?
Well, that's funny that you even know that. But yeah, so one of the strange things that I do is I like to go to cemeteries. When I was a kid, I actually learned how to drive in the Morris Cemetery. My stepmother took me there to learn how to drive. And so there's something about cemeteries that I always liked. They're very peaceful. And so we used to go there and plant flowers at, relatives that have passed away. So when I got into history, I started going to like Gettysburg, and you go to the cemetery in Gettysburg. So I really liked that when I was a kid. And when I got probably middle school, I really liked American history. That became my thing. And I really liked presidents. I really got into presidential history. My dad would take me to the Eisenhower farm at Gettysburg or different places. And it really just turned into me going and looking at presidential grave sites. So then when I would go to cemeteries to look at presidential grave sites, we would look at anybody that was famous in the cemetery. So like, for instance, a good example, it's not like anything that we do as a family. It's kind of just happens. So we went to the cemetery in Buffalo where Millard Fillmore is. And right next to Millard Fillmore is Rick James, the singer.
No way, really?
Yeah, so we would go and see Millard Fillmore, and then literally right down the hill is Rick James. So I made my my oldest daughter, take a picture next to Rick James's gravestone. There was more people at Rick James's gravestone than Millard Fillmore's. And then she goes, "Why am I doing this?" And I said, "When you watch Chappelle's Show when you're 18,
yeah, right.
you'll understand." So she has a picture of Rick James.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. How do you know who's in each cemetery?
You can look it up. There's actually a whole bunch of websites. There's people that do this are called gravers, actually. It's actually a name for it.
Wow.
And it's actually more big. It's bigger than you would think. A lot of people do it. And it's really become kind of fun. And a lot of people that wouldn't think would like it go with me. Like last year when we went to the Outer Banks, Jordan Beers. A lot of people, your guests probably don't know. Your audience probably doesn't know. Jordan's my niece. So we were on the way, and I actually talked her into going to Arlington with me, and we saw Kennedy's gravesite and Taft's gravesite. And the coolest thing that we saw, and if she was with me, she would say this too, was the changing of the guard. We were just in awe, standing next to each other, just her and I. It was blazing hot, and it was fun. We were just standing there. We drove by the White House together. we left our family at the zoo, and her and I went off and did our stuff in Washington, D.C.
At some point here on the podcast, we have a Sydney alum. That's his job, is
The changing of the guard.
changing of the guard thing. He's one of those guys, and he was a great baseball player here. Do you think that would go over well? I think it would be just cool to hear about it, right?
It is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. I've seen a lot of really neat history things. I've been to a lot of neat places. That was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And Jordan and I still talk about it. We'll send each other YouTube videos about. There's a whole bunch of different YouTube videos out there, and I got a book about it. We've read that. I think I gave that to her. I'm not sure, but we talk about it a lot. One of the coolest things we've ever seen, and that's really all I do is I try to see things that I've never seen before. That's really how the cemetery thing ended up.
That's going to spark my interest. I'm going to have to look up, and hopefully he is still there. And he was on one of my original lists where I was like, that's someone with a cool story. So
yeah, it's neat. Yeah.
So let's transition to Norwich and your job as athletic coordinator, of course. Now, since all this news has come out, Section 4 has voted as a whole not to do fall sports. So it's going to be no sports for a while. But at the forefront of this was Norwich and Oneonta. I think those were the first two districts locally to say, look, we can't do this. We have our reasons for not doing fall sports. And I just thought I would pick your brain on why Norwich and Oneonta were so far out ahead of everybody else.
I sat through so many meetings, and one of the most frustrating things I dealt with all summer was just reading guidance. We would get the Department of Health guidance, then we would get NISFA guidance, and then we would get state ed guidance. And the guidance became really confusing. And we really couldn't tell what we should be following, what we shouldn't be following, what we should and shouldn't be following. For instance, state ed guidance said you had to be 12 foot away from each other in PE classes. And then you have other guidance was saying you had to wear face masks if you can't maintain 6 feet. It was really contradictory. And that was the first struggle we had in Norwich. We were struggling that really from day one. I met with the superintendent several times, and we couldn't wrap our heads around it because we were being told so many different things. I think really the assumption came around that the state was going to go to the January model. They were the ones that originally put it out there. And I think when Governor Cuomo came out on that Monday, I think it was a Monday, and he shocked us all. And I don't think anybody was ready for it. I don't think we were ready for it. I don't think that we expected it. And then when that happened, we had several discussions about having athletics and having sports, and that was really our focus. And then some other things happened. Our students in Norwich are going to be they're going to be virtual full time, and we didn't think it really made sense for our students to be virtual and then having athletics. Now, just in the last few days, we're hearing like the budget cuts aren't going to happen, so we might not have to be virtual all the time, because the virtual decision was made probably based on financial reasons. But a lot of people are asking me about the whole money thing out there. Money really didn't have anything to do with it. It really was safety. I know a lot of people won't believe me when I say that, but we had the money in the budget in Norwich. We had the money. I do the budget lines, so the money was there. The superintendent never came to me and said that it was cut. She just said the guidance is contradictory. It doesn't make sense. This probably isn't safe. And then how Oneonta kind of wrapped it up into it is Oneonta had their issues going on with SUNY Oneonta. And I know you know Nate, but a lot of people probably don't know that I've known Coach Mackey since I was probably 14, 15 years old. And he was reaching out to me. We talked a lot. And they had their reasons. We had our reasons. And we announced on the same day. We let them announce first. We knew they were going to announce. And then I think in their announcement, they said our fierce competitor or something rival is going to announce also. And that was us. So we let them go first because they were dealing with the COVID issues at SUNY Oneonta. And then really we went. And really I thought that everybody was going to eventually go that way anyway. I thought we were out in front of it. We needed to get out in front of it. We needed to focus on opening school in Norwich for all our kids. I mean, education comes first, and that's what we were focused on. And then I think a week later, everybody followed suit. That's really what we were focused on. We were focused on opening school. That's our focus. That's still our focus. I still haven't had a kid in my classroom yet, and that's what we're trying to get in Norwich. Athletics is a great tool. It's a great thing out there, but we need kids in school.
I know that we'd had an additional conversation with Jerry Mackey since he had been on the podcast, and he did say that we asked him point blank, like, for Oneonta's decision, was it safety, was it SUNY Oneonta, was it budget? And he did say that, SUNY Oneonta, they did think about it, but similar to what you said, despite everything else, it was just about the safety of the kids, and the guidance was a little confusing. So definitely tough decisions. From what you guys are hearing out there at other schools and from other ADs, do you think the budget part played into it for other schools, or do you think a majority of schools were just saying this guidance is tough to follow and we'd rather be safe than sorry?
I think safety was number one. I only deal with stacked schools. I think safety was definitely number one. Money is always going to be out there, but a lot of the schools I deal with, they were taking from their reserve funds. Everybody was saying they had money for the first go around of the cuts, because the cycles go, I think it's like 4 cycles they call in, like September, and then I think in the wintertime. We don't have a lot of reserves because we had some financial issues a couple of years ago in Norwich. But really, I can honestly tell everybody here that we had the money budgeted. I believe that. I don't think it's a money thing. I think everybody really was concerned about COVID. If you look at the news, there are outbreaks happening in different schools, different churches down in the Binghamton area. I will say I think SUNY Oneonta probably highlighted it for our region, and that maybe made us a little nervous because Oneonta is very close to us. A lot of people forget in the stack, we have a lot of college towns. I mean, Binghamton's a college town. A lot of people forget about Ithaca's in our league. Ithaca's a college town. I mean, and then, of course, Oneonta's got 2 colleges. So whenever we travel, we have to go to those places.
Right. Elmira, right?
Elmira, yeah. Elmira's in our school. I forgot about them, sure. So we have that factor in our league, and I think a lot of people got nervous about that. There was a lot of rumors out there that some of the schools weren't going to actually come to Norwich and Oneonta. Rumors go all over the place in the AD world, and some people, I heard that from some different people because we're so far away. I think that played into the factor that we didn't think some of the schools would actually come to Norwich because we're 40 minutes away from every competitor. And then when Oneonta dropped out, they're our natural rival. They're the team we play everything in. We play them in everything. So I think we were kind of nervous when Oneonta was talking about it. So yeah, I would say Oneonta probably played a little bit of a factor in it, but we made our own decision. We're not basing it on Oneonta at all.
I was hoping you could tell us, not only during this crisis, but before. I don't know if people realize how much time ADs and ACs put into the scheduling, the busing, the getting the facilities ready. I mean, this is a job that could be a full-time job. You're doing it and you're still teaching. So I was just curious if you could let people know how much time you put in, nights, weekends, holidays. It doesn't matter. This job is 24/7.
If you do it right, you're always at the school. I'm there from probably 7:30 in the morning until my job's done. Today's a Friday. I was in my office with my secretary Jamie and a couple of the other coaches because we hang out. And I said, this is very strange because it's Friday and we're not getting ready for a football game.
Strange.
On a typical football night, I wouldn't get home. I'm the last person to leave the football field. I turn the lights off. I shut the fairgrounds gate. If you come to Norwich, you know the fairgrounds gate. We actually call that the Doug Costin gate. He's a coach that we name it after because he likes to come through that gate. He's the first person that always asks me if that gate's going to be open. I shut the press box down. So on a football night, I probably don't get home till 11 o'clock because I'll probably go up to the school, see if the coaches are gone. And football's the big one in Norwich. If there's a soccer game, a lot of times we'll play underneath the lights, but soccer's pretty self-sufficient. I still will shut everything off, but they get out pretty quick, the soccer teams. Basketball is a huge thing in Norwich, if anybody knows. That's the big one. So I will be at the school till, oh my goodness, all hours of the night, making sure that place is cleaned up and ready to go for PE classes the next day. So I could never gauge the amount of hours. We have a great transportation department. We do everything online, so I do all the bus schedules online. I took that from the coaches because I wanted to have more hands-on with the transportation. I usually meet with the transportation department once a week. We usually go over, have coffee with them during the off times. Scheduling is generally done by our league. So scheduling's not that hard. It's all put into Schedule Galaxy by the great executive director of Southern Tier Athletic Conference, Kevin McGough. It's all there. So I only schedule non-league games, and that's really been good for me because I'm a small town guy from Edmondson. So it helps me. I know a lot of people in the area. So like last year, I just called my friend Greg Bonskowski up and got a boys soccer game with GMU, and it's not that hard, especially if you network. I pride myself in network. I know a lot of these guys. I've known Coach Mackey for years. I've known Greg Bonskowski for years. Daryl Beers and Franklin's my brother-in-law. So and then in my job, it just took me getting used to knowing the stat guys. That helps me with my time. So time, yeah, it takes a lot of time. But I don't think I could do it if I didn't live in Norwich. If I lived somewhere else, it would be very difficult because there's times where I'll be sitting at my house and I'll get a phone call. Last year, someone got hurt. Oh, yeah, someone dislocated their knee at practice. So I had to get down there right away to take care of some stuff. If I didn't live right in Norwich, it would be difficult. But because I do, I have a family that understands. They're all in too. My wife is great. She knows that this means a lot to me. So I try to do it right and I spend a lot of time. I have no idea how much time I spend, but I spend a lot of time.
Is there anybody in the athletic director, athletic coordinator world that you've really leaned on in these early years as you kind of learn the ropes, I guess?
So when I took the job, I was asked I was asked about the job in the springtime 2 years ago, I think it was now. The first phone call I made after asking my wife about it, of course, is I asked Daryl Beers from Franklin. He's my brother-in-law. We met at Buffalo Wild Wings in Oneonta, and he sat me down and he told me the good and the bad of the job. And I'll always be thankful for Daryl for obviously a lot of things, but especially that conversation. And he told me, Rich, you're so personable. You know everybody. That he goes, I think this job is perfect for you. I think you'll really like it. The one thing that he was always cautioning me about was you're going to have a lot of sports compared to me. Because, in Norwich, I'm in charge of a lot of different sports that the Tri-Valley schools and the MAC schools might not necessarily have. So I guess Daryl was my first guy. Then after that, when I got into the stack, I always sit next to Coach Mackey at meetings. We kind of come to an agreement that before we vote on anything, we always talk. So it's very surreal to sit next to him because he coached against me when I was in Edmondson. And I love Coach Mackey. He's been great. I can't even believe that he's a friend of mine. This is a guy I looked up to when I was a kid, and now I talk to him probably once or twice a week on the phone. It's like when I see his name come up on my phone, I'm like, oh my gosh, Jerry Mackey's calling me? So he was probably the first guy. I sit next to him all the meetings. And then Chris Durden from Windsor's been really good. He was on the COVID-19 task force. I worked with Chris Durden's brother Mike for years. He was a math teacher in Norwich, so I had that instant connection. So I knew Chris a little bit. And ironically enough, probably the one guy that I talk to quite often, two more guys, is probably Dave Hogan from Shenango Forks. I don't know how that really happened. You got the Shenango Forks Norwich football thing, but Dave Hogan's just one of the nicest guys, and I could always call him up, and I've talked to him about a lot of stuff. And then really the other interesting one is the Owego athletic director. His name is Andy Bushbaum. Andy Bushbaum and I had a pretty big fight actually when I was the baseball coach. We argued over a rule in the league. And we probably didn't really like each other that much. And when I went to the first couple AD meetings, you could still feel the tension. I was on a committee with him, and you could feel the tension a little bit. I confronted him about it. We kind of jawed at each other about it. So it was tough. But then I think once we talked to each other about that rule that we were arguing over, he's been pretty good to me. He's been really good. I call Andy a lot. He's great. He knows the rules. So I appreciate Andy Bushbaum a lot. I would consider him a friend now. I would have never thought that in a million years. That's probably the one thing in the athletic director, coordinator world, is you become friends with a lot of these guys because you're working with them. I would have never thought in a million years I would be friends with Jerry Mackey and Andy Bushbaum and these guys. But It's great. It's love it. I wouldn't go back. I love my job. It's perfect. So those are the guys and of course people like Ben Nelson. I mean, he's a legend in Section 4. I talked to Ben today. So I mean, those guys, but you really rely on your other ADs that you work with.
Can you tell us about what you teach in the classroom at Norwich, and how long you've been there? It's interesting for you, and we'll get to it. I mean, you're a small town Edmondson Tri-Valley guy. I think it's interesting for a small town guy to end up in the quote unquote big city of Norwich. So that's got to be an interesting story.
So I teach social studies at the high school. This is my 19th year, I believe. I started in the fall of 2002. So I started then. I was hired as a global studies teacher. And I got to Norwich because I graduated from SUNY Geneseo, and I really applied everywhere in the state. And I had a couple friends that got a job at MBT Bank. So I had a natural place to get an apartment with those guys. And so what happened is I just applied everywhere, and I was going to try to get as close as I could so I could live with those two guys, because I lived with them in college in SUNY Geneseo. And so what happened is Norwich actually came up, and that's obviously where MBT is. So I was so nervous. I went and I applied for the job, and oh gosh, I was so nervous. I walk in, and this will ring some. This is a good name for some of your listeners. Is Mrs. Chillian was there? Pat Chillian. Her husband's a longtime soccer official, and she lives in. They live in Garrettsville, and that's actually where I grew up. I grew up in that little small town. That's where my dad lives, and she was in the main office, and she goes, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I'm applying for a social studies job." She walked into where I was interviewing. She must have said some good things. I'm guessing, and then I came out, and she goes, "Oh, you're all set." And so I went in, I interviewed for a long time, hour and a half, probably, it was forever. And I came out, and the principal said to me, the principal was from Morris at the time, his name was Jack Ross. The first question he said to me when I was in the interview was, "Do you have a work ethic like your father?" And I said, "Of course I do." And then the second thing he said to me on my way out, or the last thing he said to me on my way out is, if will you cancel your other job interviews if we offer you the job? I said, "Absolutely, I would." He goes, "All right, I'll be in touch." He called me 2 hours later and offered me the job. So I interviewed on like a Friday. It was the Friday after I graduated, and they offered me on the spot, basically 2 hours later. I took the job. It was the best feeling in the world, and I've been there ever since. I think originally when I was growing up, I wanted to go back to Edmondson, but my wife said she did not want to live in Edmondson. She didn't want to live in the small town. So Norwich became home to us. And when people ask me where I'm from, I say I'm from Norwich. It's home. Norwich is home. I don't see us anywhere else. I've taught, the original question, sorry, I got off track there. I teach social studies. I taught global studies originally. I taught some U.S. history. I've taught basically every social studies class. I've taught classes for SUNY Morrisville, so I taught a film class for SUNY Morrisville. I've taught geography for SUNY Morrisville. I've taught some character education type classes. So over the gamut of 19 years, you end up teaching a lot of things. So currently right now I teach 4 sections. I teach economics and government, participation in government. That's all I teach.
Quick shout out to SUNY Geneseo, by the way, as both guys in this podcast right now are Geneseo alums. So I'm curious, was it or is it weird? Do you ever think about this still? I know we've talked about it off the air a little bit is it weird being small town guy, Edmondson, and like kind of seeing the different dynamic of what it would have been like to go to a Class B size school? Like that's got to be interesting.
So basically the difference between Norwich and Edmondson?
Yeah.
In Norwich, you don't have that natural rival. The rival's Oneonta, right? So you have to go 45 minutes for your rivalry. I think those guys know each other, but they don't really hang out. When I was in Edmondson, New Berlin was our rival in a lot of sports, and that's 8 miles away. When you go down to Frankie's to eat pizza, those people are staring you down. My dad was an Edmondson guy. He graduated in Edmondson in the 60s. I can remember when I was a kid, my dad wouldn't even want to drive through New Berlin, right? So,
I miss that rivalry.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
really
the Edmondson. Yeah, so I think that's probably the biggest difference. Is I feel like I want to say that there's obviously school pride and stuff in Norwich, but it's very very community based in Edmondson. You have to be involved in everything when you're there. Like most kids are in the band, the choir, the musicals. They're in Boy Scouts. They're in everything because in those small towns, those groups and those organizations can't run without everybody. So everybody's involved in everything. In Norwich, you'll find like there's a football kid or there's a basketball kid. There's not really a lot of those kids that are involved in everything. So I would say that's the biggest difference. Is probably just more kids and more opportunities, probably. I guess, but they're both great in their own ways.
Before I go completely biased here and we just start talking Tri-Valley and Edmondson talk here, I was wondering what you've coached at Norwich over the years, what those experiences were like. When I first met you, you were a varsity baseball coach. So just, curious about your coaching days at NHS.
I got coaching immediately when I was there. It's so funny. Even when I showed up at Norwich, everybody knew that I was from Edmondson. And that was right around the time Edmondson was good in soccer. What did they win the state championship in 05?
Oh,
with Barrett Hawes and those guys, Paulie Stanton,
yeah,
03.
03.
So they're good, right? So they're good in that next year. So everybody knows, oh, wow, Rich Turnbull's from Edmondson. That must mean he's good at soccer. So literally my first year there, the old-time soccer coach, his name was John McCumsky, he started the program in the 70s. He retires, so they don't have a coach. So all these kids that I had in global studies class are coming up and asking me to coach. So they talked me into it. I'm a 23-year-old coaching varsity soccer, and it was something I should have never done. I mean, I'm the first one to admit it. I was probably a horrible coach. I had no idea what I was doing, and I'm coaching varsity soccer at the stack level. My first game I coached was at Johnson City, and we're losing 8-0 at halftime. I have no idea what to say. All these guys are looking at me. So I coached varsity soccer for 4 years, and that was probably enough. I was not ready for that job. And that's really given me a lot of good perspective in this role. Like, people need to be ready for those type of jobs. I was not ready for that job when I look back on it. So anybody that played for me from 03 to 07, I'm sorry. I wasn't ready. But my first year, actually, Edmondson's always known as a baseball town. So I got there, and the head coach was a guy by the name of John Martinson. And he was also the assistant football coach, and he coached a little bit at Green the last couple of years, so some of your viewers might know him. He asked me to be his assistant coach, or I kind of asked him, or whatever. I became great friends with him. So I coached, I was his assistant coach for 10 years, I think. We had some good teams. We had some really bad teams, but we had some good teams. My first year, we went to the sectional semifinals and lost to Shenango Valley, I think like 2-1. Donnie Lawrence pitched on that team. He's the current varsity baseball coach. He went on to Oneonta State. Dean Williams pitched on that team. He pitched at Utica. So Pete DeSaro played outfield. He was a good outfielder. Great players. Dan Cazaval was on that team. Great hitter. I believe that's Big Chuck's son-in-law. If you know Big Chuck from the radio waves.
Mm-hmm.
So I coached there for like 10 years, and then I begged for a basketball job. I was always a basketball guy. I love basketball. It's probably my first love. So in Norwich, basketball is the thing. I actually had to beg and plead for a 7th grade basketball job. And so I actually had to like interview for it and beg and plead. The head coach at the time was Mark Abbott, and he graciously gave it to me. So I think I coached modified basketball for 5 years, and I had some great players, had some great teams. It's crazy to say that about modified basketball, but if you came to those games, the gyms were packed, and they were fun, and we were good. I think that was the only time I was ever undefeated as a coach, was one of those years. We would play Oneonta at 4:30. Jerry Mackey would be in the stands. I mean, it was crazy how basketball is just so big in Norwich, and that really got me ready. And then, of course, Josh Bennett, the girls basketball coach, asked me. He saw me coach, and he came to Norwich. He saw me coaching, and he got the girls' job, and he asked me to be his assistant. So I was the assistant girls coach for 4 years, and that's when Oneonta was going on their runs. So Mariah Ruff was my nightmare for years, and Josh would always let me try to scout Mariah Ruff, and that was nearly impossible. I knew Mariah a little bit because she played AAU with Jordan, so I saw Mariah play really since she was probably like a seventh grader at Andy's. So I knew a little bit from there, and then at that point, an opportunity came where Mr. Martinson was stepping down from the baseball job. So I left girls basketball and did my complete focus on varsity baseball. And I was also the modified soccer coach. I got back into soccer. So, and then I did baseball for 8 years. That's where I met you, Nate. We had some good teams. We had some bad teams. My first year we got upset, but we were really, really good. We got upset by Union Springs 2-1. Had some great players on that team. Cody Barnes went on to Lemoyne. John Iacono was the catcher. Ricky Runyon was the third baseman. A young Jake Walsh was the shortstop. He went on to Oswego. Just some great players. Josh Haynes played the outfield. He went on to Elmira. Robert Jeffrey, an alderman in Norwich now. He was a right fielder. We were good. We were good that year. We just got upset. If we could get past that first round, we could have made a run at it. We were pretty good. Colin Fern was on that team. If anybody follows him on Twitter, he's a big NASCAR guy now. He was on that team. He threw strikes. So we were good. Then we had some down years, and then of course the last few years we were decent. We were around 500, but that's funny. Like when I was doing baseball, when you were 500, you were like a rock star. People were talking to you in the streets, and then I helped Tom Collier do boys basketball for a year, and we were 500 that year, and people were mad at me because you're 500 in basketball. So really, to answer your question, I've coached a lot of different things. I would say that I was a very average coach. I wasn't probably the best coach in the world. I'm not like Coach Weir, where I'm going to have to get my diary out to add up my wins by any means. No one's asking me for Rich Turnbull's wins, and I'm at least good enough to recognize that. I think I found my niche as the athletic coordinator. I'm more of an organizational person than probably a head coach. I was probably a better assistant coach than a varsity head coach. I just fit that. I fit that niche a little bit better. But I didn't have a whole lot of success, but I coached a lot of things, boys and girls in Norwich, and I enjoyed every minute of it. And I still talk to a lot of the athletes that I've coached over the last 19 years. I can't even believe I'm saying 19 years.
Why is Norwich such a basketball town? I mean, you just kind of talked about it. The other sports are important, but from November to March, why is it such a basketball town? It's like people really are crazy there for it.
We should have probably said this from the beginning. The disclaimer, right? That this is Rich Turnbull's opinion and not the opinion of Norwich High School. So this is just what I think. I think the 93-94 championship teams really put them on the map. I mean, a lot of people consider them some of the best basketball teams to ever play in New York State. I still have some relatives that talk to me about those teams. I watched them as a kid. So I really think that I think it was the 92-93 and the 93-94 state championship teams put them on the map. And then I think right after that, Gus Macker came to Norwich. And Gus Macker is just quite an event. Jamie Mullen at the YMCA and his crew with Tom Revore and those guys at the Norwich YMCA put on one heck of an event, and I think that really gets everybody going. So, and a lot of people still can remember those great championship teams, and they've had a lot of success since then. I mean, since I've been there, numerous sectional championships from Mark Abbott and now Coach Tom Collier. I mean, there was a run there, probably 5 years ago, where Tom and Ryan Collier they coached to 5 straight sectional championships, and really, if West Hill wasn't there, they probably win the state championship. Those were the teams with like Mike Sutton and Zan Stewart and Michael Orles. There was a game down at the Binghamton Arena where Zan Stewart missed a shot at the end of overtime. That was maybe one of the best high school basketball games I've ever been to. I think Tom tells me the story. A great friend of mine, Tom Collier, tells me the story. I think there was one turnover Norwich had in that game, only one. I don't know. But I think I think just the success breeds it all, and then really the girls programs turned into something special with Josh. I mean, I when I was there with him, we won a whole bunch of divisional championships. Must be it's me because they didn't really win much until I left. So we had some good teams, but they've been really good in the last few years. And probably the hardest thing with COVID was telling Coach Ben and his team that they were done, right? Because they were still going. And I had to walk into the gymnasium and tell those kids at practice that they weren't going to be able to play anymore. That was hard. That was hard. And then I immediately left because when someone else cries, I cry. And I didn't want to cry, and I let kind of Coach Bennett handle that, and because he likes to talk to his team and all that. So I think just success breeds success, and there's been a lot of basketball success in Norwich, and it's probably the most fun thing to watch, but it's also probably the hardest thing to manage, that tiny little gym with people all over the place as the athletic coordinator. So,
Hey, quick shout out. We can't forget my guys, Norwich Wrestling.
oh,
I feel like they've kind of adopted me over the last year. We had Mikey come on, Mikey Squires, and I know we're going to have Dante and Coach come on. So just shout out to those guys for everything that they've done. And it's got to be fun for you to getting to know that whole crew.
right. So I was a wrestling fan when I was a kid, but my wrestling was WWE. I was a huge WWE fan when I was in college. That was the Attitude Era with Stone Cold and The Rock and everything. So when I would come to school, I would joke with those guys about, oh, I know how to wrestle and all this type of stuff. So I really knew nothing about wrestling at all. And that was one of the best things about becoming the athletic coordinator is I got to see other sports. I had Tristan Reifenberg in class. I had Frankie Garcia in class. I still talk to both of them today. I have great relationships with both of them. But I never went to any of their matches. So this year I made it a purpose of mine when I took the job that I would go to every home wrestling match. And then if they went to the state tournament, I would go to the states. So I went to every home one this year. It was awesome, great experience. They actually, just like you, they kind of took me part of their program. I never knew Mikey Squires. I never had him in class. He kind of would talk to me all the time. Dante I had in class. Dante is so much fun. I've known Bob Hagenboo, the coach, for years. I used to play cards with him like 15 years ago. And they kind of they took me in. I would go into the wrestling room, and it was great. They had me handing out awards at the end of the year. And then I went to the state championship, and I saw Dante win. And, of course, the tough loss by Mikey. And Tyler Rice was there. I think he got fourth. Probably the best weekend as an athletic coordinator I had was being up there in Albany. Next time I'm staying the whole weekend. I think it was maybe 2 weeks before COVID hit when I was up there. And it was great. I love wrestling. I never thought in a million years. I'm a basketball guy. I love wrestling. My son loves to go and watch the wrestling matches. I can't get him to go to a basketball game, but he loves going to wrestling. So maybe there's a future there for the Turnbulls. I don't know.
Before we dive into kind of our finishing topic of Edmondson and the Tri-Valley, can you tell us your, I don't know if it'll ever actually happen, but your bet with Dante?
Oh, yeah, Dante. Yeah, so in class, I'm a big networking guy. I like to have fun. I like to goof around. I'm not really that serious at all. I don't even try to pretend that I'm serious. So one of the things that we came up with in my class was I was going to challenge seniors, because I only teach seniors. I was going to challenge seniors at what they were good at. So it really started with Matt Giglio. He was a diver for Norwich, and I was going to do some dives in the swimming pool. And then there was a kid that was in band. His name was Robert Brown. We were going to play the trumpet or something. I don't know. And then of course it ended up being you got to wrestle Dante. And the big joke was how long could I last? And Dante would always say, "You'll last as long as I let you last." And I said, "I'm quicker than you think." But funny story about Dante is one of the first wrestling matches I went to. I said to Dante, I forgot who they were wrestling. I said to Dante, I go, "Dante, how long is your match going to take?" He goes, "How long do you want it to last?" And I said, I don't know. He goes, "Well, just throw me a number." I go, 30 seconds. He goes, "Okay." So he wrestled for like 30 seconds, pinned the guy. So that's the type of relationships I had with kids. I've always had relationships with kids like that. I like to goof around, I like to joke around. I am not a serious person. A lot of people don't like that quality about me, but I think that's the best quality I have. Is I'm not serious ever, really. And you know when I start yelling in class that's when you probably should be quiet because I'm not serious very often. And it's some people like it, some people don't, but the kids seem to like it.
So I know that you and I have bonded over our Tri-Valley League ties. I'm a GMU guy. I had family that went to Morris. Of course, you're an Edmondson guy. So we love talking Tri-Valley. But take us back to your Edmondson days. I think as most Tri-Valley athletes do, they look back fondly at their playing days. Even if you weren't on a great team, it was just a great league with great people and great other schools to play against. So, I mean, how much did you enjoy your time with the Panthers?
As much as I love Norwich, I do love the Tri-Valley, and I loved growing up in Edmondson. I have a pretty unique history. My dad's an Edmondson graduate. My mom's a Morris graduate. They split up when I was 4 years old. So my mom moved to Edmondson. My dad was actually in the Morris district. So my dad was the head of buildings and grounds at Morris Central School. My mom worked in New York Central. So on the weekdays when I was with my mom, I would go to all the Edmondson events, and that's where, of course, where I went to school. Then on the weekends, my dad would take me to the Morris games when I was a kid. So when I was growing up, I would see guys like Rob Joy play and Bill Fisher play, and those guys were great. So my first experience of really watching basketball, and thanks to my dad, was taking me to the Morris games. And a lot of people don't know this. I'm actually related to the Joys. My mom is related to them. My mom's a cousin of theirs. So I think it would be like Rob Joy's grandma and my grandma were sisters.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't really do much with them because my mom was in Edmondson, but I knew them, and I knew them a little bit. I was the same age as Jessica. Jerry was a little bit older than me, so I would go and watch Jerry Joy play. And then as I got older, I used to go to more of the Edmondson stuff. And then in the 80s, Edmondson made a good run to the state championship in baseball, maybe 88, 89, somewhere around there. And that's when I was really getting interested in sports. I was maybe like 5th or 6th grade at that point. And when I got into middle school, Mr. Tazier, who's the longtime baseball coach there, he was also the basketball coach for a while. He asked me to be his ball boy for basketball. And he went to school with my dad, so they knew each other. I knew him a little bit. And I was like on cloud 9 when that guy asked me to be his ball boy. And he was the first person to ever take me to a Syracuse basketball game. And I owe a lot to Mr. Tazier. He was great. So he just incorporated me in the basketball world. I loved basketball. He probably was trying to keep me out of trouble, because I was always that kid riding my bike around town, playing basketball on the courts behind the school. The courts are different now in Edmondson. They would be in right field now. That's where they were back when I was growing up. They did an addition. So I loved it. I loved growing up there. I loved being the small town guy. I always thought I would go back and teach social studies there. I got asked to go back there and interview, but I never did. I just fell in love with Norwich. But I loved the Tri-Valley. I loved Edmondson. I had some great experiences. Baseball was my first love, probably. I played since I was a little kid, all the way up through. We had some good teams. When I was a junior, I primarily had a backup role, but I pinch ran usually every game for our first baseman. And I actually scored a run in the championship game, and I think we actually beat GMU in my junior year. So I had kind of a pinch running role. My senior year, I played outfield, and I really didn't have any expectations because I kind of sat the bench a lot my all the way up through. I played a lot in Pawnee League. I played a lot in Little League, but there's so many people to play at Edmondson that you just don't really get a spot. So I went out. I played my senior year. I started in right field, and I was struggling hitting in the batting cage inside. I just couldn't hit. Mr. Tazier came up to me and said, "Rich, you're fast. Why don't you try to bunt?" I said, "Sure." I never really tried to bunt before. And so The first game we played, I believe, was GMU. Joe Molita, right? Was he?
Yeah.
He's a GMU guy, right?
He's my guy.
So he was playing third base. He's a big, tall guy. So Mr. Taser said, go up and bunt every single time. So first time I go up, I bunt, I get a bunt single. Second time I go up, I bunt, I get a bunt single. So then everybody knows what I'm going to do. So Joe Molita literally comes in all the way up. I bunted it over his head for another bunt single. So I had my first game my senior year. I had 3 bunt singles. I bunted all the time. That's all I did was I played small ball. And it worked. Mr. Taser knew exactly what I was doing. And then it actually let me see the ball better. And I ended up batting like 430 or something my senior year. I was second on my team. I ended up being a first league all-star. And I was like a second team like Daily Star player or something. And all I could do was bunt and steal. And that's it. We lost my senior year to Milford in the league championship. I think we lost 3-2. I had a run. I don't know if I had both runs, but I know I had one run in that game. Basketball was my thing. I loved basketball. I played for Dave Bertram. Dave Bertram was my guy. I loved Dave Bertram. He came to Edmondson, and I believe he coached just my 2 years there. I think it was my junior and senior year. And I loved playing for him. He taught me work ethic. He taught me how to hustle. He taught me intensity. I never met anybody quite as intense as Mr. Bertram. And what I really loved about him is everything you got, he made you earn. And we worked hard in practice. And I enjoyed everything of it. And then my senior year in basketball, we some of the guys on my team broke code, and I was one of like 6 guys left, I think it was, on the team. And we qualified for sectionals, but I don't think the school wanted us to go. And so I kind of had a little bit of a falling out with Coach Bertram, but I loved him. I haven't really seen him or talked to him. I know he's an athletic director. I hear him on your podcast. Just never was able to really reconnect with him. See, he left to go. I think it was Cooperstown after that. He left to go, and I loved that guy. I heard the Harlem Wizard story on your podcast. I was present for that, and I was there for that game, and all of that was true. He pulled up from half court and made a shot. I couldn't believe it. He just drained a shot from half court. He used to dunk on me in practice in loafers. He was probably the best basketball player I've ever seen in person. And I've seen some. I went to Golden Valley, so I've seen some guys. That guy was unbelievable. And maybe he'll listen to this podcast, but if you do, you're unbelievable. He was an unbelievable player. And he's a great coach. And then I played soccer. I played football for 2 years, and then the 9-man league in Edmondson folded. So I stopped playing football, and I went and I played soccer my junior year. And my coach was Mario Reyes, great guy. I think he lives in Florida now. He's a Spanish teacher in Norwich. Not Norwich, Edmondson. And he would always say to me, just run as fast as you can and we'll kick you the ball because you're really fast. You don't have any skills, but you're really fast. So my first game I ever played, I scored a goal. It was in the Edmondson tournament back in the old days when we played behind the school. And I thought I was awesome after that. We were okay my junior year. I think we maybe went to sectional, maybe won a game or something. And then my senior year, we were okay at the beginning of the year. And then we just clicked. It was probably the best team I ever played on. We clicked at the right second. And we lost to Margaretville in the sectional finals. And I think I had like 6 or 7 goals that year. I got hurt halfway through the year. I really busted up my ankle. I think it was against Davenport maybe in a non-league game. So I had to sit a couple games. So after that injury, I sat out for a while. I had to, I think I sat out maybe the Milford game and some other games. I don't really remember. It's so long ago now. And I think we were maybe 1 game behind in the league. So we didn't play for the league championship. But then we just went on this great run. And it's got really nothing to do, it's really no animosity on my part now, but there was a lot of animosity back then because the girls' programs in Edmondson at the time were really good. We had the Osborne twins and Cheryl Robinson was on those teams. So we always felt like we were playing second fiddle to them. And so we kind of went on this run, and we just wanted to prove to the town that we were worthy of the praise too. Because we were always known as kind of like baseball kids. And then So we made this great run. I think we beat Hunter Tannersville. Is that the guy? Is that the team that had that really great kid that could throw the ball in?
The flip throw-in
Yeah,
kid.
the flip throw in. I remember Mr. Reyes, our coach, was prepping us on that kid. I remember we played. I think we played in South Courtright against them. Maybe I don't remember. Mike Bolton would remember. He's a Twitter follower of yours. I remember Candor was the number 1 seed. We never had a home game because we were the 9 seed. So we ended up playing Candor at Whitney Point, and we won like 5-0. And that's when we were like, wow, we're actually pretty good. And our goalie had an assist in that game. I'll never forget that. He punted it the length of the field, and I think Mike might have actually scored the goal. And then I forgot. Maybe it was Hunter Tannersville next. I don't really remember. We could go back and look, I'm sure. But we ended up playing Margaretville in Oneonta at the Hall of Fame fields. We wake up in the morning and it snowed the night before, so it was the first time I ever played in snow. I remember I had to dig out some gloves to play, and I really probably wasn't at 100% at that point. And the cold, I remember, really was bothering my ankle, but I was refusing to come off the field. And I do remember in the first half, I believe it was one of our wingers. It was Ricky Clark. He hit the crossbar. If that ball goes in, who knows what happens? Maybe we win. And we lost. We lost in overtime. And I remember the goal was kind of like a cheesy goal on the left hand side. And it was funny because I listened to your podcast and I was really impressed with Coach Palin. He was the coach against us that game. I didn't know him. I've never talked to him. I see him on Twitter and stuff, but I remember, and I don't know if he remembers this, but he said something in the Daily Star that really got us ramped up. I forgot what it was. It was something like, yeah, they're the 9 seed, so we're expecting to win by 5 goals or something. And we were irritated by it. And I probably could find it. I have a scrapbook at home.
We might have to find it.
Yeah,
we're going to have him on again.
It was a quote that really got us. I remember we were really offended by it, and it really amped us up. And we played a heck of a game. I'll never forget. I knew it was for real because the place was packed, and there was people in town that were like waving to us when we went to the game. And I looked over, and I had family members from Pennsylvania that came to the game. And when you're a kid, you just didn't realize how big it was. And I look back on it, and I'm like, wow, we went to the sectional finals, and we were right there. And and then basketball, I talked about. Baseball, my senior year, we lost to Afton. I think it was 3-2 in Edmondson, and they went on to win the state championship. So my senior year, I was part of some good teams. I enjoyed it, and I loved being part of the culture of Edmondson. I go there now, and no one remembers me. That's probably good. I left, and I'm not that far away. I have some family that still lives there. I still pay attention to what's going on. I know some of the names in the paper, but I'm probably a long lost. They're not putting me in any Hall of Fames and putting me in building any statues in Edmondson for sure. But I had great coaches. Mr. Tazier, Coach Bertram, Mr. Reyes were fabulous coaches. I learned a tremendous amount from them. I owe a lot of my great childhood memories to those guys, and there's lots of people in Edmondson that I could talk about all day. I could probably do an Edmondson podcast. But that's 20 years ago now. Norwich is home, and I'll always have a special spot in my heart for Edmondson. I don't know if I bleed orange and black anymore, but I have a special spot in my heart for them.
You have absolutely 100% made my day with your Joe Molita story. So Joe Molita was my neighbor growing up, and to this day is one of my best friends. We talk every single day, and he actually comes back and plays every summer on my WCDO Gus Macker team. We've done it the last 4 or 5 years. It's all GMU guys playing the old man division, and I can't wait to unleash on him that he got a bunt sent over his head, and we are just gonna bust on him for days. I love it.
I hope it was him. I remember that name. Like there were some great players when I played. GMU was good when I played. They just merged right when I was playing. I remember playing JV basketball in the old Mount Upton gym, So I think I played in the new gym my sophomore year. I think my career high is actually in that gym. I think it was like 16 points or something. Bertram would be proud. But I think my career high is in that gym. That I played against in GMU. I played against Joe Molita. I played against Jim Bob. Played against Craig Pope. I played against Travis O'Hara. All those guys. I have no idea where they are. As I said, when I graduated from Edmondson, I kind of just left, and I realized there's a lot of other stuff out there. I still love this area, but a lot of people don't even realize I'm from there anymore. But there was a lot of great players in our league back then. Milford was unbelievable when I was around, with the likes of Ryan Seward and Jason Robinson and Steve Wolf, and Seth Petronas was younger then.
Yeah, you would have had Seth Petronas, maybe Pat Kelly.
Yeah, sure.
That whole group. I would love to get Coach Crowley on at some point.
And then
yeah.
And then Morris had like Kevin Meredith and Jeff Grant, and one of my closest friends, best man at my wedding, was Ryan Harrington. He was a junior on those teams.
So Coach Mackey would have been coaching those teams?
Yeah, so the Coach Mackey Rich Turnbull story goes pretty simple. My dad would have to go down and plow the parking lots on snow days, and he would let me go in and shoot in the old Morris gym. And a couple times, I believe, Coach Mackey found his way in there, and I would actually shoot with him. And I played a little bit with him there. I saw him at the old Clark Sports Center. So we just developed a basic friendship. There was a great story where at the Otsego County Fair, he puts $20 down to see who can make the most three-pointers, him or I. I'm sure I beat him. And then really, Jerry left my senior year. I think it was Keith Thompson, who then married Daphne, right? I think he coached after Jerry. But the great story was my close friend, one of my best friends, was Ryan Harrington on Morris. And the big talk was that Ryan was going to shut me down my senior year. He was a junior. So I go into the old Morris gym, and I talked trash. I was not a good sport at all. I'm not even going to admit that. And so Mr. Mackey would say stuff to me when I'm running by him. You can't make it. You can't make that. And he knew I could shoot it because he's seen me shoot several times before. And so I did not score, and there was like a minute left in the game. Neither one of us had scored. Morris was beating us by like 20 points. They were good. They were better than us. And Mackey's still talking trash to me. And so I fire one up, deep three-pointer. I make it. And he was furious at Ryan because Ryan let me score. Ryan told me that he made him run all day at practice the next day. I don't know if that's true. But Ryan, I don't think, scored, and I had 3 points.
Yeah, 3.
In the last minute of the game. I was so amped up for that game, and I was so nervous because there was so much on the line. I was so connected to Morris.
Boy, talk about a small, old-school gym right there.
Oh, I loved Morris.
That was great.
I actually feel like Morris was a bit of a home court for me because I played there so much because my dad was there. But I loved the Morris gym. I loved the Edmondson gym. The New Berlin gym was awful because it was tiny. And a great story is I coached with Tom Dixon a couple years ago. And Tom Dixon was the coach when I played. And I'll never forget one of the times we were getting ready for a game. We were playing Unadilla Valley. Was when you might have been there. We beat them by like a last minute Marcus Cashman shot
in Norwich
2 years ago.
Yeah,
right, something like that. Yep. So before, when we were prepping for that game, Tom Collier would say something, then he would let all the assistants say something, and I was generally last. And he would say, "Rich, what do you got to say about this?" And I said, "I've hated Unadilla Valley since I was a kid. I hated New Berlin. I never liked anything about them. I never liked Mr. Dixon when he was the coach there. He was the enemy. I hate Unadilla Valley." I was just going, because that was always my rival as a kid, and I was just amping it up. And Mr. Dixon was looking at me like I had 4 heads. Like, wait, this guy hates me? And I sat next to him the whole entire year. But I was just trying to amp the kids up and all that kind of stuff. Trying to build up on that rivalry. And that was a great game. Place was crowded, and yeah, I've built a friendship with Tom Dixon. He's a great guy. That's the best part about this job is you get to meet so many people.
My last Edmondson question again: would you have been on JV or maybe modified, or didn't know your ball boy days? When I can remember going, I was really little, a Tri-Valley Championship where it was like, I think Edmondson was undefeated and New Berlin had one loss or vice versa, and I thought I was at the NBA All-Star game. I was like, these guys are huge, they're awesome, like wow. And it was at Hartwick. Do you remember this game?
Are you setting me up for this?
No, honestly, I don't know.
I was the ball boy, and Mr. Dixon was the coach, and Mr. Taser was the coach, and I was the ball boy. I believe it was 1992 or 1993.
Yeah.
We were undefeated. My brother-in-law, I believe, was on that team. We had a great team. My stepbrother was on that team, and I was the ball boy. So for the Edmondson people, it would be like Lance Jennings, and my brother-in-law was Jeremy Vunk, and my stepbrother's Dave Lamperin, and Corey Schoonover was probably on that team. The Lunds were on that team, Randy and Ryan Lund. So I was the ball boy. I would have been like in 7th or 8th grade, just tagging along. Mr. Taser's tagging me along. And yes, I was there. I was on the bench. We lost. It wasn't that. I think the New Berlin guys was like Joe Nelson was the big center. And he waved his finger at us, I think like the Kembe Mutombo. And I remember I was so irritated by that. So we did lose. It was an upset. New Berlin upset us. We were undefeated. And I remember going into Mr. Taser would always kind of keep me out of the locker room when it was going to get bad. So I would always kind of wait outside. He probably loved me way too much because he would keep me out of harm's way. So I was sitting outside, and we got word. I think it was John Jackson, he's still at Unadilla Valley. They wanted the game ball because we supplied the game ball. So I was waiting outside the locker room, and I believe John Jackson came up to me, who I'm friendly with now, and he asked me to go in and ask Mr. Taser for the game ball. So that was horrible. I had to go into the locker room and retrieve the game ball to give it to the New Berlin people. It was awful. I remember Mr. Taser was so mad at me, like just because it was just, it was just bad. And it was just a bad deal. There was one time when I was the ball boy, we had to get escorted out of New Berlin because it was so bad. Mr. Taser made me stand next to him when we walked out of there to the bus.
Would that be like Josh Gronwall?
He would have been
guys?
a little. Josh Gronwall would have been a little bit. Yeah, no, he would have probably been that age, right? Josh was a really good shooter for New Berlin. He played. I never played with him. I saw him play a lot. But yeah, he was a New Berlin guy, kind of like a wing player. He was good. He could shoot it.
He works here in Sydney. I've never met him. I know he has kids here in school. And I can remember watching those teams and thinking, like, for whatever reason, he stuck out to me as being a really good player. And he works here in town, and if I ever see him from a distance, I'm like, it's like I saw Michael Jordan. I'm like, it's Josh Gronwall over there, man. Wow, New Berlin.
It's funny you say that. Like, he would not know me. I would definitely recognize him. He would not know me. I would know him if I saw him. And isn't he working like a pharmacy? Because I see him in the Penny Saver.
Yeah,
like a picture.
He's a pharmacist.
Right.
And he's probably like, God, who is this guy? Like,
right. Yeah, we're talking. Yeah, he would not know me. I would know him. His dad was a principal, I believe, in Edmondson for a while. Right. Okay. He was the baseball coach, I believe, before Mr. Taser. So everybody always asks me if I know the Groundwells, and I know of them, but they were kind of a little bit before me. But I know who they are. I've seen them play, but they have no idea who Rich Turnbull is.
Well, let's finish up with our last two questions. So Norwich, Edmondson, you travel all over. What is your local spot to eat? I'm interested to hear this answer.
So as an athletic coordinator, you do eat everywhere. You eat every chance you get. I had a colleague one time. His name is Ed Erickson. He was in the military. He said you never give up a free meal. So when you go to the athletic coordinator meetings or director meetings, you always eat what they give you, and you always take seconds. But if I'm going out to eat, depends on where I'm at, right? If I'm in Norwich, I usually stick close to the school, so I'm a Magros guy. I eat there. When I was growing up, I ate at Spike's religiously in Edmondson. I used to get the chicken finger sub at Spike's. I used to get it probably 3 days a week. I have no idea if they still have it there. If they do, I'll take one for free as a shout out.
I'm gonna have to check it out now.
But so I will always try to find a chicken finger sub similar to the one that Spike's made. and I finally found it. Magros makes one. So I get the Magros chicken finger sub probably once a week. I'll probably eat it tomorrow, actually. So there's lots of great places to eat in Norwich. So that's where I generally eat in Norwich. But, you know, if I'm in the Binghamton area, I'll do Speedy Rib Pit because I go to Binghamton a lot. We do the Moe's Wendy's thing a lot in Binghamton. We kind of stay on Front Street. Go to Oneonta, we'll go to, I love the Undercover Eggplant in Oneonta. We go there. Buffalo Wild Wings. But I try to get out of Oneonta because I can't wear Norwich stuff there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Purple's not allowed in that town, I don't think.
Yep.
And so lastly, you know, what are you watching these days? TV, Netflix? I know you're kind of a podcast guy too. What are you into these days?
I watch a lot of YouTube. I could have never imagined I would ever say that in a million years. But my kids watch YouTube, so I'm like, what's going on with this YouTube thing? I watch a lot of YouTube videos. So I'm a big hiker, so I watch a lot of hiking YouTube videos. I watch a lot of music videos. I love music. I'll watch, obviously, sports. I watch sports clips on YouTube. I do watch Netflix. Right now, I'm currently watching that Challenger, the Space Shuttle Challenger thing that just came out on Netflix. I was in school when that happened, and I can vividly remember watching that on TV. So I'm kind of reliving my, I don't know, first or second grade years. So I watched that. I've been watching a little bit of The Office on Netflix. But I'm watching that Challenger thing right now. That's what I'm watching. And give a little shout out to the Norwich people that I've been watching a lot of old tapes because we just created a YouTube channel where we're showing old Norwich games. So I just watched the 1990 Johnson City football game probably 3 times to prepare it. I have a guy that I work with at school. His name's Rhett Genung. He's helping me put those together. So we put a lot of the YouTube stuff together. So I can't believe I'm saying I'm a YouTube guy. Yeah.
I finally got backup. People make fun of me because I'm a YouTube guy. I just like watching clips, running stuff, movie clips. I don't know. You just go down the rabbit hole there, and you just keep finding stuff to watch.
The rabbit hole is a great way to say it. Like you go on and you say, all right, I want to watch a film clip from the 1990s, and then all of a sudden you're watching film clips from the 1960s.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Sometimes I don't know how I ended up where I ended up, but it's just the way it goes. So, well, Norwich Athletic Coordinator Rich Turnbull, longtime coach there as well. I'm so excited to have you here today to talk about Norwich and the Tri-Valley and Edmondson and everything. I got one last Edmondson question. This one just popped into my head. As a Edmondson native, do you get irritated when people pronounce it Edmonston?
Yeah, absolutely. That's always bothered me, and I think it comes from that whole Edmonton thing. So I've dealt with that my whole life. People always say Rich Turnbull, like there's an A, or people will say Turnbull. I get that all the time. Actually, I got the NIAAA certification on the tweet they put out. It said Rich Turnbull. I still get that. So Edmonston and Turnbull, that always happens. The first day of class, I always say it's Rich Turnbull, like turn and bull. So yeah, that's drove me nuts with my name, and it drives me nuts with Edmonston. There's no the ends at the end of Edmonston. Yes, it drives me nuts.
People that are in the area, it's like they don't know they're doing it, and I never really noticed it until I started doing my coverage, and I was just saying it all the time or typing it out for Twitter. It's such a common thing.
Yeah, the end is at the end of Edmonston people, right? How about with Norwich people? I probably didn't, but they say it like in one syllable, Norwich. Like that's what they'll say.
Go to Norwich.
Yeah, I'm going over the hill to Norwich right now. A lot of people do that. I know that drives some people crazy. So if I did that, I apologize. I guess I'm becoming a native of Norwich.
Yeah, I mean, people do the Oneonta. I mean, there's no like, you don't say Oneonta. It's just right. Oneonta.
I have a good friend at work. I have lunch every day with Mike Christie, the football coach. Became a good friend. That would be a great podcast guy from his Oxford days and football coach. And then Art Regas, he's from Walton, so he pronounces it Walton. I always say Walton,
yep.
Like that. And then he always picks on because he's the football coach at Unity Valley, and I always call it New Berlin, like that. He always says New Berlin. I go, no,
it's
not New Berlin.
Yeah,
it's New Berlin. Right. So we've actually, it's funny you bring this up. We've had this conversation in my office several times. So Art Regas and Mike Christie, they know exactly what you're talking about.
2 future guests, I'm sure, here on the on the podcast. I'd love to get both of those guys at some point.
You could just come to my office and get all three of us at the same time.
I have some equipment ready to go now. I am set, so I can take the show on the road.
Right.
So it's going to happen, and who knows what I'm going to end up with then. So, well, Rich, thanks again for coming in, and this was awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Nate, for having me. It's been a pleasure.
This is episode 74 in the books here on the Nate Lull podcast, again with longtime Norwich coach, teacher, and now athletic coordinator Rich Turnbull. We got a lot more coming. I think I overbooked myself here in September and into early October, so stay tuned. A lot more coming right here on the Nate Lull podcast.